Kevin Cleary with a knife video for you, and today we're going to answer the age-old question, does size matter? And if you've watched more than 5 minutes of this channel, you know what my suggestion is going to be. Of course, you're going to have to make up your own mind, and the purpose of this video is to do two things. One, to help you kind of get my point of view on this, to know where I'm coming from when I say I prefer a larger knife, but two, to give you some of the considerations that you may want to bring to bear on your decision about what size of a knife to buy and own and carry. There's a couple knives that are a little out of reach, so I may have to reach over out of frame here a little bit. So if I jostle around a little bit, that's why I just got left one too far over there. So I have here the Cold Steel Recon 1 in the micro size. This is a knife that stays in my car all the time. It's, of course, very small, and I often use it in those situations where I need to cut something, but I'm sitting down with my seatbelt on, so my everyday carry for the day is kind of trapped. I could get it if I really wanted to, but it's sort of stuck in my pocket, so it's just more convenient to get hold of this. Usually it's just opening packages, it's cutting something for my wife or my son, cutting the little tie off something, a new pair of shoes or a new shirt or something that 3-year-olds want to wear whatever they got new immediately, so you got to cut stuff off of them. And I can say that I've used this quite a bit. It's a very useful knife in terms of small knives. It's probably one of the more useful ones you're going to come across, with the exception of multi-tools. I do have a couple of small multi-tools that I really like. The first one and the main one that I carry all the time is the Leatherman Style, and it's the Style CS, so it's the full-size style with the scissors on it. The other one is the Gerber, the Bear Grylls multi-tool, and I have that in the car as well. Anyway, those are outside of the consideration of this video. I'm just kind of saying that FYI. Here's another knife that I sometimes carry with me as a secondary blade, or if I'm in a situation where my primary blade is large, maybe the Recon 1 or this Cold Steel Voyager or something. I'll carry this sometimes as a money clip, and then I've got it as a secondary blade in case I want to, open a package or my mail or whatever. Walking down the street, right? If I'm walking down the middle of the road, I'm usually not going to be opening a big knife and walking through a crowd, carving at my mail. So I maybe pull out this little guy and do that. Now, because of that experience, I can speak, I think, a little bit about the relative usefulness of large versus small knives. And I'm going to tell you, both those knives are very, very sharp, but let's say I'm outside and I want to start a fire. I'm going to prepare a fire stick. I'm not reaching for this thing, right? I'm not. Let's say I, am getting ready to go to work one day and I'm looking for the knife that I'm going to carry in my pocket that day. Again, this is not going to be it. Rather, I'm going to be looking for a medium to large size folder. Now, I'm going to say I'm a little opposite to some guys. I know if you watch Nut and Fancy, he really gets hung up on the weight. And now this SOG Kiku, it does pass his weight test, but the next size up doesn't. And I'm going to bring this out when I talk about cool factor, but this knife does meet Nut and Fancy's specs in terms of what he likes to carry for weight, but it's a little small. The Para 2 again meets his specifications. I would not say this is a small knife. It is a 3.5-inch blade. It's incredibly useful, and I have no complaints about this knife in terms of size, but there are times that I prefer the Manix 2XL, which there are a lot of similarities between those two knives, but the Manix 2 is just bigger, and so for that reason I sometimes will prefer it. I think it's got a great grip. I think if you're in a situation where you need a lot of reach, it's got that. That 4-inch blade gives you a lot of cutting for food prep if you're cutting vegetables or something. I've used this for that, and it performs really, really well. So let's get into the points that I think are worth considering. The first one is leverage and comfort. Leverage and comfort. If you're doing a lot of cutting, fatigue is going to become an issue. and hot spots on the knife are going to become an issue. And the reality is a larger handle is more comfortable over time. Further, it gives you more ability to push hard into a cut. So if you're whittling, if you're cutting through a heavy rope, if you're any kind of hard cutting task, cutting through multiple layers of plywood, of cardboard, let's try. Or if you are on a construction site and you might be cutting edges off of wood or whittling out a piece of trim a little bit, a larger knife is going to give you the leverage you want to push hard. And you're going to be able to do that longer. I can tell you that in 30 seconds of constant use, you're getting really, really tired of this knife. Fatigue sets in much faster because it's harder to utilize in any way. And that's exaggerated with this knife, even though the overall size is a little bigger because it's so thin, and I would say even a little bit fragile. Your fatigue sets in very, very quickly. Another aspect to consider is hard use. Things where you're going to be putting your knife under a considerable amount of stress. Generally speaking, a larger knife has to be heavier built anyway, and so it's going to hold up a little better. That's not always the case, and I'll give you one example that is here actually for the Cool Factor example. This is a good EDC knife, okay? It doesn't inspire a great deal of confidence for, hacking down a tree, and I wouldn't do that with this knife because it's such a nice looking blade. I would say it's more EDC task compatible. Would you make fire sticks with it? Sure, and I have done that. Would you cut cardboard? Sure. Would you trim a little piece of wood off something? Sure. Would you baton? No. Would you cut a heavy rope? Sure. F serrations are very good for that, but I'd be a little bit careful as I was doing it. Unlike, let's say, this knife, whatever cutting task you have, you just go at it whole hog, just hack at it, pull on it, whatever you want to do. You're not going to have any issues in terms of strength. You're not going to break the knife. You have nothing, that doesn't even enter your mind. And so when you come to hard use tasks, batoning, skinning an animal, cutting through, bones and joints, any kind of bushcraft task could potentially put your knife into, any kind of bushcraft roll could potentially put your knife into hard use. My go-to knife is the Schrade SCHF9 for most heavy cutting tasks in the woods, and then my pocket knife would be more for finer tasks. But that kind of explains some of the reason, because if my EDC knife is all I've got with me, I want to know that it's pretty capable. And in some cases, that is all I've got with me. But hard use tasks and bushcraft tasks kind of push you toward a larger size knife, or do that for me. Now, carryability. Now, this is something we need to consider, and it's something that you may or may not have a tolerance for, and you may or may not have the wardrobe for. If you're on a job where you've got to wear dress pants every day, you're going to prefer this knife to this knife every time, just because even though it's a few ounces of difference in weight, in a pair of jeans, I don't even notice it. A pair of khakis, I don't even notice it. If you're wearing dress pants, you'd know. Okay, so you'd probably prefer this one or this one. Both are very light. Here's two very, very comparable knives, and people have noticed their similarity and commented on it in the forums. This is the Meyerco Shockwave, designed by Kirby Lambert. This is the Ontario Utilitac 2, designed by Joe Perdue. Both of these knives are very similar in blade shape and in overall sort of flow and feel, and so they beg comparison. This one is lighter, it's a little bit smaller. This one is much heavier. This is probably about 5 ounces. This is 6.5 ounces or so. You're going to notice a significant difference between the two, and if you're wearing pants that add to that, you're definitely going to prefer this one. Now, I actually prefer this one a little bit for a couple of reasons that are aesthetic, okay? One, I like larger knives in general, but two, it's a prettier knife. It's a more well put together knife. It's not just about functionality with this blade. It's also about a little bit of style. This knife is just about functionality, and it does functionality very, very well. So carryability is a factor. And if you get into a really big example, this guy, man, it's unruly. It's impractical to consider this as an EDC knife, okay? Because it is really hard to carry. You can carry it. It'll fit in my pocket. I have carried it. I will still carry it in the future, but you just need to know it's not very practical to do. Now, this knife, on the other hand, it is the larger of the two fossils, or the larger option of the fossil, Circuit fossil. I carry this a lot, and it's the larger version. It's a little bit heavier, but because the handle is fairly narrow in this spot here, you know, yes, it's a little thicker here, but this is all blade. You don't notice this that much in your pocket. It is an all steel knife. It's not milled out at all, and so it's a little heavier. But I've carried this in fairly light pants and not had any issues with it, although they weren't traditional sort of suit pants. Next, safety. In those really dire situations, you know, car crash, animal attack, plane crash, mugging, lost in the woods, you know, all those really bad scenarios, even if, you know, some medical situation, you've fallen and been tangled in a rope, or, you know, a load has fallen on you and now you're trapped under something and you cut your way out. In all of those kinds of situations, guess what? I want a bigger knife. And one of the reasons I carry a knife every day is because I want to be prepared if there is a car crash, if there is some horrible incident that I've got to deal with. And in that type of situation, no one has ever said, man, I wish I had a smaller knife. Everyone always says, you know, man, the bigger the better, right? So maybe you want this guy for that kind of situation over this guy. Both great knives for most of your EDC tasks. Both are going to perform equally well. And here's another point. When we talk about all the things we do with our knives, one last point is precision. And here's what I'm going to say about this. This is just going to serve this is going to be our, you know, large, tactical, hard use, whatever acronym you want to put here, folding knife. This thing can do everything this can do, but vice versa is not true. This cannot do everything this can do. And so if I'm going to carry one and depend on it all the time, this is going to be the knife, because I know everything and anything this is going to do it. This one, no, I'm going to have some limitations. Okay, so those are the more practical considerations surrounding size. There are some subjective factors as well. One is cool factor. So here are two knives, the SOG Kiku and the CRKT Fossil. Flavio Akoma, Kiku Matsuda. Both of these are design knives. What I'm going to say is, in designer knives, the larger size generally captures the essence of the design better. Okay, so generally when a designer makes a knife, they tend to make bigger knives in the first place, and bigger knives can tend to capture the essence of that knife better than the smaller version. That's one of the reasons I've actually considered you know, putting this up on eBay or letting you guys know that I'm interested in selling it in favor of the larger version. Now, another example of that is the Miyako Shockwave, designed by Kirby Lambert. Again, it's a larger knife, and that makes perfect sense because designers tend to design in a bigger size. So this is 3 3/4 inch blade, and this is such a beautiful knife. And in a smaller size, it would not have the striking sort of flow and beauty that it has in this size. It is also a little bit heavy, if you're into designed knives, now one of the things I got to say is actual custom knives are very heavy, much heavier than most of what we've talked about here. And so if you're into custom knives, you're used to carrying a big heavy blade. And so really this discussion is not really directed towards you. And so that covers the design. And then there's the cool factor. Okay, you know, when you talk about how cool a blade is, generally you're not talking about this knife, right? No one's like, whoa, I would just love to have that Micro Recon. That thing is so awesome. No, everyone's talking, when they use that kind of phraseology, they're talking about the full-blown, full-size Cold Steel Recon 1. They're talking about the full-size, you know, any full-size Spyderco. They're not talking about the Ladybug or something. They're not talking about, you know, they're talking about this more so than they're talking about this. Okay, that's just in terms of cool factor. Larger is definitely cooler. Now, I know this is subjective. Okay, this is from my perspective, but I think it's a pretty broad perspective that not a lot of people are really turned on by this. Okay, I'm sure there are some out there. Finally, value. Most blades, when you look at the sizes that are available, the small versus the large, the price difference is not that significant. And so in terms of value, you're getting more for your dollar with the larger blade most often. Now, there are some exceptions. You know, sometimes you'll see a knife that is smaller. You know, now here's a perfect example. The medium Voyager, or the, yeah, I guess the, I don't know, this is the XL, so I guess the large Voyager is like $4 difference. Okay, so $36, $39, $3 difference, $36, $39. You know, obviously in terms of what you're getting for your dollar, the larger one is better. The same is true of the Kiku. I think this guy probably lands around $100. The larger size is maybe $110. So when in terms of value per dollar. Now this guy, I did find, you know, there's a couple times when I was looking for this, I saw, oh, there's a really good deal. And when I click on it, it would be the smaller one. Okay, so sometimes you can get a better price on the smaller one, but you're sacrificing, I believe, some of the coolness, some of the essence of the design, and you're sacrificing some of those practical things I talked about before. So that wraps up this whole video, and the thing I'm going to leave you with is this contrast. Both cold steel knives, both lockbacks. This is not the triad lock. I don't think you can do the triad lock in this small of a scale. However, here's two opposite extremes, and this happens to be the largest knife in my collection and the smallest. And guess what? I think generally size does matter, and I'm going to prefer the larger knife over the smaller in probably 85% of circumstances. So that's my take on the knife size discussion. I'm tempted to post this on the Knives I'd Never Buy video by the late Boy Scout, because I do not agree with him when he talks about, you know, he has a video called Why Small Knives Rule, and how in his Knives I'd Never Buy video, most of the knives are really big knives, and he just doesn't feel like those are very good. I would definitely, he does a pretty good job. He has EDC and EDC Plus, these two categories, and I definitely fall into the EDC Plus category. All my knives don't fit that. All my knives, some of them are, you know, the smaller, lighter blades, and I like them, and you know, I'm still interested in them, but I'm not going to. I'm not quite, you know, overall my collection leans toward larger folding knives, and it's for all the reasons that I've given you in this video. So I hope that you know, explains my thought process, and I hope that allows you to think through some of that stuff for your own collection, or your own, you know, maybe you're looking for that one EDC knife that's just going to be great. If you really are, send me a message. I'd love to hear a message and have a bit of a dialogue with you, and even start a bit of a conversation with other viewers in terms of what they think would be a really great EDC if you're just going to carry one. Talk to you later, YouTube.